Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where in the country you're joining us from. I'm excited to welcome you to our Building Strong Boards webinar. This is our first premium webinar of the series Developing Effective River and Watershed Organizations. I hope everybody can see the screen. If you don't mind, please type in the chat box if you're able to see our first slide. Okay. A few people are saying that they can see it. Okay. Then to prevent background noise, we have muted all participants, but the chat box works very well for communicating questions. Please feel free to use it. Enter any questions, comments you may have. This session and all of our sessions are going to be recorded, so a link will be sent to you later, along with some handouts that I'll be referencing. And at the end of this webinar, just like all of ours, we have a short survey that we hope you may complete so that we can just get better with your feedback. But we are experiencing a little bit of a delay in advancing the slides. It's not as bad as yesterday, that was 30 seconds. Today is about 10 to 12 seconds between advancing the slides. We apologize. It is probably weather related. And to preserve bandwidth, I'm just going to turn my video off so that we can run as smoothly as possible. So like I said, we have the chat box option for people to type in any questions. We do have a survey coming up later, and I'm hoping that everybody can hear me right now. And with that, we will just jump right straight in to for folks that may not be familiar with River Network. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary. We have a unique niche in the environmental community, as we focus on 6,000 plus river watershed organizations that work at local and state levels. And we strive to engage also a broader community to support healthy rivers and water resources. Our focus is structured around 4 strategic areas, these being clean, safe, affordable drinking water, resilient cities and communities, healthy rivers and agricultural landscapes, and robust and effective water laws and policies. So we provide our community, with anyone with curiosity, access to proven best practices related to these strategic areas that I mentioned. We have our website, our annual conference, which is referred to as River Rally, publications, and access to a network of peers and experts who can help, and also other resources that will give you as individuals, your groups, and your coalitions the opportunity to be effective champions for your own waters. We also deliver direct consultation by helping you to become effective and courageous and sustainable. So this webinar kind of ties to some of those tools. We have a national team with a special set of people understanding the challenges on the ground. So we know what it takes to take care of the waters. We understand the importance of science, how to use policy and advocacy, and we definitely are here to serve you. You will see there in this slide that we have a map. This is one of our newest features. We call it the Water Protector, so check it out on our webpage. And there's also a new section also called Meet Our Network, so I'd encourage people to read about it. Now, as paid River Network members, you have access to this and other premium benefits and resources, which are discounts to our conference, funding for water projects, trainings like this webinar, discounts on equipment. We will also help you promote your own job openings and events. We work with a national audience, as you can see, so we can feature you on our website, our monthly e-newsletters, our quarterly e-magazine, and on social media. So some of you probably heard about us through these avenues, but we are also here to help promote your own program. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach our membership associate, Carly Schmidt. She can help you. So for today, we will be reviewing a little bit about what the different kinds of nonprofit boards exist out there. We will definitely try and differentiate roles of staff and board members. I will highlight some essential tasks that board members should always be thinking of fulfilling, discuss a few best practices that have come along the years of experience that we have, and troubleshoot some challenging scenarios. But by all means, again, feel free to type in your chat box any questions or needs for clarification. Our experience with webinars tell us that they need to be highly interactive. So I will limit the theoretical details and instead reference some real examples as I explain some of these concepts and best practices. So as we prepare to dive in, please think back to your board, your particular circumstances that you're in, and how these tools and practices may be able to help and apply to your group. A few days after the webinar, I will be sending an email with a few handouts, one of them being a blank form which we call the Organizational Action Plan. And in it, you can write ideas or tasks that you think you wish to complete following this webinar or a few in our series, and then track as you are implementing these. We are a leadership development team that is available also offline to clarify questions you may have. I am one of these three-person team. My name is Francisco Paco Yervides. I'm a facilitator, a networker, and a leadership development manager based out of my home office in North Central Ohio. 2 days ago, we had 85 degrees here. Today, we are at 58 degrees, probably part of the reason why we have a little bit of bandwidth problem. But I have worked and assisted the capacity building needs of river network groups and partners for 6.5 years, primarily in the Great Lakes Basin. But I have also been fortunate to interact with water-oriented groups and individuals throughout North and South America for the past 17 years. This webinar series is part of our Leadership Development Institute, and make sure you mark your calendars for these future exciting webinars. And please feel free to let others know about this series too. We are always looking to growing our network, and we believe these tools are specifically geared and useful for groups like yourselves. And speaking about yourselves, I would also like to know a little bit more about who's here. Just to start off, if people can chat on the box, what your role is in the organization. Maybe you're a board member or a staff person, a volunteer, or maybe even a mixture of board and staff members are by your computer. So just please type so we can see that this tool is working, and also I can see what our audience is like, even though I recognize some of the names of the attendees. So we have staff member, executive director, board president, executive director, board member, board president for Eagle River Watershed Council, co-founder and director, board member, director. So I would say we have about a healthy 50-50 of board members and executive directors. Thank you very much for indulging me in this, and I'm glad to see this is working and that folks are responding. One more question, please. How many years of experience do you particularly have in nonprofits? Maybe you're on the more experienced side, 5+ years, or somewhat experienced between 2 and 5, or you're relatively new in the nonprofit world, less than 2 years. Can people type how long they have been working on nonprofits? We have less than 1 year, more than 5, 12 years, 3 to 4, 7, 5, 6, 10 years, but only one as a director, 18 years. Okay, so not many newcomers, but it's okay. We will try and also help out those that are just learning the ropes. I'm glad a lot of experience here. I have an answer here. Manager of our conservation districts. We have a board of directors, but are not a nonprofit. We do work with governmental organizations too, and quasi-governmental organizations. Thank you. Excellent. Somebody said 18 years. That's awesome. Okay. So I personally like to start this particular webinar with a quote from one of my gurus, Mark Smiley, on organizational development. It is our experience the number one factor needed to ensure a strong board. Hopefully you will concur is a successful and dynamic and effective leader. This person can be one of you as a board chair, an executive director, or a CEO. But ultimately, it's better if it's an awesome pair of both of these positions that will lead you and are hopefully leading your organization. I hope this is the case for most of you. Second, it is critical to highlight the need for strong relationships that this leader or this pair of leaders have instilled with each board member. These interactions ultimately determine if you have a functioning or, unfortunately, a dysfunctional team. So in the back of your minds, it should be your goal to always have the right people with the skills and talents and commitment to lead and move your particular organization forward. So the development of your board is an ongoing process. You never to the point where you're done developing board, especially as new leaders emerge and are recruited to join your board, and of course others may retire or move on. So keep in mind that boards, just like your organization, evolve, especially since situations are not static. So if your board and your organization are not evolving or reflecting the changes in both your constituency and the issues that you're addressing, then you're truly not meeting the needs of the largest amount of your stakeholders. I will touch briefly on this evolution of boards for nonprofits. Most of the groups that we work with, most of you, are at this stage 1 or 2. At the beginning, stage 1, the organization is young. The board is referred to as an organizing board. It is characterized by a small group of like-minded individuals. There's few committees, and these individuals usually have close ties. They have been invited to join by the founder, or they're the founders themselves. Processes are pretty informal. There's a strong sense of ownership, and there's leadership typically by consensus. The board is definitely a working board. They're involved in almost everything. They retain significant power relatively to staff. And in some groups, they may not even have paid staff at this time. But as the organizations grow, so does the board in numbers. Hopefully, also becomes more diverse in composition, and is referred to now as a governing board. Here, board committees play a larger role. The workload is distributed, and staff begin to have more authority and responsibilities. The fundraising role begins to become increasingly important at this stage. And as after many years, the board reaches a stage that is referred to as institutional board. The focus here is primarily for development needs, and board members are specifically selected for their capacity to give or access donors and resources. The work is done mostly in these committees that are mixed of staff and board members, even some volunteers. And governance now is carried out by an executive committee within this larger board. So again, more individuals in your board. It is important to know which stage you may be at, your current organization may be having. They have their own sets of challenges and opportunities. And I want to clarify that stage 3 is not the end product. Groups tend towards it, but we've seen groups at stage 2 that go back to stage 1, and this just depends on circumstances, resources. So as staff is added to your organization, it's important to distinguish the roles of board and staff to minimize tension and misunderstandings. So I'm sure some of you can relate to these somewhat quirky comments, statements here, and maybe they ring true in some of your cases. This table I set up to contrast some of the primary bigger picture differences in roles that the two groups may have, the board and the staff. So while the board sets long-term direction, the staff primarily works on daily operations, program management of the organization. As the board is providing financial and fiduciary oversight, it assesses the overall impact of the organization. The staff's responsibility is to provide details to the board on progress, on obstacles they encounter, especially towards these common goals and the mission of the organization. Like I said, the board is critical in ensuring financial resources or securing them for the longevity and sustainability of the organization. So staff may carry out the programs, and they are, of course, responsible for implementing policies that the board sets out, and definitely for completing grant reports. So some smaller organizations, or at the beginning stage, the organizing board, there are some responsibilities that are done jointly, especially when boards are of probably less than 7 individuals, and perhaps there's only 1 or 2 staff, very limited human resources. So some activities are shared, and we have this tool, which I will share later, which we call the Shared Leadership Grid. It's a good exercise of a few activities. This is just a screenshot, but we have more activities or duties that maybe you want to reflect and figure out who's doing it right now, who's responsible for it. Is it a board member? Is it primarily a staff person? Is it the responsibility that's equally shared? Somebody asked if this presentation will be available afterwards, and yes, definitely. All of our presentations and recordings will be sent to you later. So as you complete this shared leadership grid, which I will be sending, bear in mind that there's no right or wrong answer, and no two organizations are exactly alike. So you just have to figure out, it helps you to figure out where you may apply your strengths, your interests. It also helps clarify when maybe something is not getting done. And again, it's just meant to kind of guide the conversation and the planning process. After all, boards that understand roles and responsibilities, they work more effectively as a collaborative team, and they have a greater impact on their organizational performance. Some groups that I've worked like to share their prospective board members a sort of overarching checklist of roles expected from them. So here's another visualization that I like to show of bigger picture roles of board members. So if you look at the top of this circle on the left in light blue, your board members should be like the bridge to the community, right? They serve as ambassadors. They help make important connections. They bring their own networks to bear to the organization's benefit. And as we move clockwise, this is in no particular order, but board members determine the strategies. that the organization will use, the important partnerships that they should enter or seek. They make sure programs are relevant and representative of the needs of the stakeholders and the community. So you can type these bullets into kind of like a board expectations document. Boards having a strong understanding of programs are linked better to their engagement, their strategy, and their leadership. Then we have over here on the right, the red wedge. The board manages the executive director. This person in turn manages the organization. So it is their support, evaluation, ultimately the hiring and firing of the executive director that is a very critical role there. The bottom green, we see that, like we talked about before, that the responsibility for the viability of the organization, they are often asking if we have the right resources, are they being used correctly? The board will approve the budget, they review financial statements, and they ask those difficult questions. They also help raise money, and they make personal contributions and open doors to potential donors. So in our series, we do have a section on fundraising, but just wanted to make that important distinction of one of the key roles of the board. And finally, the board makes sure that the processes are in place, the policies make you an effective in terms of governance. This is our meetings run well, are our committees functioning, are the individuals effective, do we have who we need, or do we have some gaps in skills, in connections? Again, are we reflecting the diversity of our community, or do we need to recruit and orient new talent? So we will get into a little bit more detail in that part of governance, but just remember, a board that assesses their own performance, so is self-reflective, they will perform better and ultimately improve in their core responsibilities. I'm gonna take a little pause here to check for any questions that people may have. I'm gonna type in here. Any questions so far? Okay. Again, feel free to type them if they arise. Okay, the personality or the way of operating of a board is referred as a board culture, and we should talk about this culture or this behavior that occurs in order for boards to be strong and effective. A good board member should have a culture of inquiry. They should be, I call it, professionally curious. They should listen intently so they may engage in meaningful conversations, and they should invite other points of view. The board chair will facilitate conversations so that we get the benefit of everybody's input. We should prompt for information sharing by everyone. There should be stimulating conversations, reflection, self-assessment. The board will be troubleshooting problems and should not just be rubber stamping decisions or policies. So these robust discussions, this culture, allow board members to be better informed when tackling controversial topics. The engagement will improve if you distribute the leadership roles amongst your board members, and that way you're fostering good interactions. And the board member will definitely share in the accomplishments, their accomplishments and concerns openly. So I have managed personalities. People are different in terms of how they express their interests or their passions, and we must professionally be able to express these regardless of the differences. I have here on the far right a culture of respect and trust will foster teamwork, definitely. Just think about a time when you have been successful. Most likely you had a team that you trusted. The board should be able to trust the staff with the information they present. but also be able to verify it and not follow it blindly, and be this updates on programs or so. And then, of course, the chair will be that channel to inform the board regularly of opportunities, challenges, problems. The staff should feel comfortable with sharing good and bad news early, on time, and openly. So they may be able to then ask for feedback, for direction, or for alternatives. This mutual respect yields loyalty, and this is one of board members' primary duties, duty of loyalty, to put the organization's mission and its constituencies ahead of their own individual interests. For that, boards usually have a conflict of interest policy, and that allows for disclosures and openness. The board should be able to review any organizational documents, and transparency should occur for the board position appointments or for appointments of top executive. Like I said before, boards should maintain their civility and order in meetings and to each other. Again, I understand at times there are emotional topics, there's deep commitments and passion towards a cause, but we must make sure to make these meetings not personal or avoid any distractions. And board members should know that inappropriate behavior could be grounds for dismissal. They should be controlled. And in the middle there, I think we believe boards should have place high importance and priority on their culture of inclusivity. They should be aware of their unconscious biases, reflect on how meetings are run, if everybody is being considered during decision making and discussions, or if somebody is left out. There should be intentionality on checking in, and we'll cover this a little bit more in depth in a future webinar. But for now, please take note of that. Your board must be reflective of your community. It should be, that way it will be as authentic and representative of the most amount of people as possible in your stakeholder universe. Otherwise, you're really not taking into account some points of view, or certain individuals are not represented or invited to the table. So, of course, when seeking diversity in your board, you can evaluate differences in race, ethnicity, gender, age, disability, political point of view, status, sexual orientation. All of these wealth of differences allow you to be more representative of your community. Okay, next I wish to talk about 5 best practices we have observed for strong boards. These are, I will explain to them further along in the presentation, but selecting well, articulating your expectations clearly, providing organizational information and ongoing education opportunities, engaging every board member, promoting teamwork and accountability, and anticipating and preparing for leadership transitions. You should always be thinking about these practices. In selecting well or build your own board, I believe board recruitment is typically done by the governance or recruiting committee, and it happens throughout the year, not just when there's gaps. You should regularly be evaluating your current pool of talents and skills and contacts, and note for places that you are falling short. Like I said, a homogeneous board leads to group thinking, enlightenedness, while a heterogeneous board is bound to be more creative, innovative, and often challenge ideas. So it's also important to have a diverse board that may attract diverse donors or supporters. When selecting your board, work to eliminate any blind spots, biases, prejudices. Develop your personal awareness. Again, be inclusive, but avoid tokenisms or simply trying to fill a quota. Remember, I was told this recently, no one person is representative of the entire subsection of a population. So hence why boards should be kind of larger. So you're filling some mighty big shoes. Found this picture on clip art, but I'm trying to represent that you should strive for testing your recruitment techniques, your cultivation strategies, and have a plan in place of how to involve and interest, evaluate, and recognize these board members. Everybody should participate in the recruitment of board members, and especially if you're priding yourself in being a highly effective team. So some groups out there use a board member application form, or at least you should have a set of questions ahead of time to ask prospective new board members. Questions like, what talents do you hope to bring to the organization? Why are you interested in joining us? This allows you to make sure that you know what their goals are, if there's a common purpose, or if everybody's on the same page. And again, these questions, sometimes there could be interviews even. It's a two-way process that you also want to know if you're a good fit for them. So try to determine what their agenda is for joining you. If they focus on, if they're persons that are focused on detail or larger picture, if they're team players or prefer individual approaches. As you're articulating expectations, there's a document that often people use as a board job description. Again, we can share those documents with you. Most groups also have a fundraising commitment form, and ways to check in regularly in terms of the expectation, why the board joined, and if they're fulfilling those tasks that they set out to be. You can be creative. I worked recently with a group that dramatically improved their board participation at their annual meetings by doing informal challenge of reporting back on how many individuals they were connecting with and donors they were bringing to the event. So they had a graph there, and it was a healthy competition. But you definitely, these documents help you spell out what you want from people, what tasks are needed, or what helps them feel more confident about what they're contributing. And satisfaction amongst board members is very important to increase both their confidence and especially their retention. These documents also should have legal and ethical expectations from board members. There should be mentioned somewhere there of the respect for a democratic process in terms of representing an official position to the outside world. There's also another document that I will share. It's called an agreement form that can be updated and reviewed annually, but it is a place where typical duties are spelled out in terms of attend donor meetings, participate in committees, serves as spokesperson, accompany the executive director in fundraising efforts, be available for expert opinion, use personal connections or an affiliation for potential volunteers, clients. So all of those bullets are some of the things that your agreement form could have. A third tip of best practices that I was mentioning is provide ongoing information and education. I sometimes refer to this section as placing all cards on the table. Time and time, board members have told us that a board manual is not just appreciated, but a great reference material, and they carry it with them to their meetings. That's a place also where they usually hold their minutes. Make sure you have and you hold an orientation for new board members that includes your staff. This helps build relationships and also for them to learn about the programs. And this should be done as soon as possible after board members are elected. I have there a bullet of assigning a mentor. That's usually a good practice of a veteran board member taking somebody under their wing for just a few months at least for asking those questions as people are learning the ropes. But in your orientation, you're clarifying time commitments, financial demands that board service may entail. Like I said, it allows the new board member to get to know the organization, its mission, its policies, its work plans. It's a good practice to start including them in some committee work, and it allows folks to bond. But also, board members join usually for some of the learning opportunities that they may have from an organization. So here's a training opportunity where board members are learning from a networker a particular skill set. We just had last month our board retreat. They held it in Richmond, Virginia, and they had a special time allocated to learn about water quality management from volunteers. So learning opportunities are definitely appreciated and suggested. If I could have folks again answer in the chat box, how many of you have a new board member board manual? Do you, if you have set one for orientation? I will check on the answers. I have answers saying don't have one. Yes, I have one. It's in the draft stage, but never been optimized. So there's an opportunity there. We don't have a manual, but we do have orientation. Yes, but probably need to do a better job of getting a copy to new members. And sometimes this copy can be an electronic copy. I've seen it in CDs. So if you don't have one, don't worry. Maybe you can add it to your to-do list. And again, there's resources that we can share of some of the items that a board manual can have. I will highlight them right here. These are some of the essential parts or elements of a board manual. They're very straightforward, and some of these sections you probably have somewhere else in your organization. You just need to put them together, or like someone said, you may need to update. For example, the list of board members, that of course needs to update it regularly. But when all of these things are put into one place, the board member can refer to it, can decide whether they join a committee or not based on what that committee is set out to do, how often they meet. They may be able to also review budgets or audits and definitely catch up to speed with minutes. That important bullet at the end, a list of other important contacts or advisors is important. I will explain later because a board member that may be cycling out of the board can also still remain engaged as an advisor. But your work plans, your strategic plan, and of course the legal parts of your bylaws or articles of incorporation, the mission and structure of the organization, and a brief summary of the history. It shouldn't be a very large binder, but I have seen them with quite a lot of information in there. So I touched briefly on board member cycling out, but term limits is a topic that boards wrestle with in terms of governance. And for the typical watershed groups we've worked with, a term is about a little bit over a year, and usually there's an average of 2 consecutive terms for a board member to participate. There's obviously advantages and disadvantages of having term limits. Advantages being that you're reinvigorating the group's energy, you bring fresh ideas, perspectives, you promote a larger circle of involved volunteer leaders. You're able to balance continuity with turnover, and this also becomes a built-in rotation mechanism for frankly ineffective, passive, or troublesome board members. People also point out, like I said, to disadvantages of term limits, and you may be thinking about them. Loss of expertise or institutional memory, increased time for recruitment and orientation. People feel like, oh, we're always recruiting new board members. The need for continuous education and team building towards cohesion. So yes, I understand those concerns. Somebody said here, the sound cut off for a second. How many years is the average? The average amount of years of a term for watershed organizations is just over 3. And the average consecutive terms is just over 2. Thank you for asking for clarification there. So if you do not have term limits, you definitely retain passionate, active board members that usually have a very deep understanding of the organization. You know their personalities, you know the group dynamics of these folks. That's if you don't have term limits. But if you do, if you don't have term limits, you run the risk of organizational stagnation. We've all heard of fatigue, boredom, loss of commitment. People come to me often and saying these board members are not motivated. It's difficult to integrate sometimes new board members because it's intimidating, because there's cliques, there's a perpetual concentration of power. And like I said, again, you need to reflect changes in demographics in your constituency. And so overall, I would suggest having term limits. As we touch a little bit on stagnation, boredom, complacency, I came up with this slide that highlights what some folks refer to as the 6 R's of engagement. And I will try and walk you through a few scenarios that maybe you are familiar with or experience, and see how we may be able to solve them. Definitely the best thing to do is to reach out to individuals that may be having some difficulty, ask them what's wrong, how can we help, and there's a few reasons why a board member may not be engaged. Perhaps they don't feel needed or underutilized. This is especially true when the boards are maybe too large. Maybe there's apathy on their behalf. So recognition, the R for recognition, their efforts. Yes?
We lost your screen.
Oh, that's strange. Let me double check. Sharing. Show screen. Show now? Thank you, Carly.
There we go.
Wow. Must have been because I haven't advanced it or something, but thank you for catching that. So as I was saying, to recognize their efforts and contributions often. Praise them, let them know that they're valued, that they're helping you for this cause. Maybe a board member is not engaged because there's little opportunities for discussion. So there's a R there for role. Show them that they have a role in this bigger picture. Maybe they're overwhelmed and they have a limited perspective. This happens when maybe the boards are too small, or maybe they fail to see the relevance of their particular activities or actions. Show them how their contributions are yielding results. That's the R for results to this overall picture. Maybe they have insufficient orientation, or they view your agendas as too weak, too long, too routine, too many years of service. So show them respect, value their time and their input, incorporate their comments, their feedback to future agendas, on setting specific times for training. Here you may also want to give a shout out, a special here, rewards, commendations out of for exemplary individuals. So both respect and reward with recognitions. And like I said earlier, many board members join organizations to interact with like-minded individuals. So make sure that there's opportunities for social interactions, camaraderie, develop professional relationships. Again, those relationships yield more trust and definitely improve on engagement. So on the teamwork part here is part of our fourth best practice, but the key for teamwork I see is fostering effective board committees. They make board service fun, worthwhile. Remember, you want to have the right people and the right team. You shouldn't have committees that just have one person, or you shouldn't have people commit to working on more than 2 committees, for example. That overstretches them. Also for teamwork, you should be checking in on folks before they ultimately check out. We can develop a sense of accountability through annual evaluations, either in group or individually, not so much with the parameters of this cartoon, but maybe with other self-assessments of effectiveness. Again, we have a form that I will share, a handout, and that could reinforce the commitment to excellence and to improvement. And definitely conduct exit interviews. This way you learn what worked, what didn't work, and you will improve on some of your aspects of either governance or recruitment. But the number one reason on exit interviews from board members, and see, I'll ask you, what do you think? What is the number one reason why board members leave a board? You can type it in your chat box. Somebody said burnout, not asked to do enough, not being utilized, take up too much time. Well, you're kind of like hinting at the right answer, not feeling like they are helping much. Yeah, underutilization, lack of satisfaction. They feel like they're wasting their time and they're not seeing the progress. Frustrated with lack of progress over commitment. So yes, definitely it all compounds, right? So again, having clear tasks and defining some metrics of success, and again through the evaluation process, checking for potential problems or if we're missing the mark, that definitely will increase your retention. Thank you again. And our last best practice is planning for leadership transition, or as folks also refer to it, board succession. So it's not just when a board member leaves. You can also plan on rotating positions, assignments, leadership. That way the board is healthy and natural. It also prevents stagnation and allows for renewal. When people rotate different positions within the board, different committees, they are able to learn different aspects of the organization. And I have a template that I will share too, of items to consider when doing these transitions. But you of course have to make sure that you have term limits set on your bylaws. You have to have a meeting and brainstorm on what is coming up in terms of expirations or vacancies. What is your current pool of makeup of persons in your board, and what are the future needs of projects or grants. Maybe you need a certain expertise or skill set. So again, you should have a list of potential board members throughout the year and be ready to be asking them for joining in your board. You should also have a staggered term system. That prevents, of course, the complete overhaul of your board at once. So staggered meaning you probably get 2 or 3 board members, or 20 or 30% of your board to rotate out per year. I will move to the next slide. Okay, so these are some of the recommendations. I want each of you to go back and see some essential items that you may want to put in your calendar of activities that the board does. Long-term direction, setting annual priorities, the effectiveness, evaluate the effectiveness of your organization, developing an annual budget. See if and when these happen. Maybe they all happen towards the end of the year, or maybe some of them happen throughout the year, like we've said before, the recruitment and orientation of board members, or some of them may happen before others. So you cannot develop a fundraising plan without an annual budget. But definitely consider some of these bullets here as areas that your board should be thinking and should be making a priority to consider throughout the year. So again, I mentioned that we were going to end our presentation with a few challenges out there. And here are some of the suggested solutions. We have talked of some potential tips for improving, again, engagement with the 5 R's, the six R's in that puzzle slide, or other tools that I've mentioned in the past. So job descriptions, again, it's a document that I'll share with you. A formal process of orientation. Somebody had mentioned we have it, but it's not formalized yet. So set aside the time. One thing to note in orientation is be careful with information overload, like trying to fit too many things in one day. So try and space it out. I know people, their time is very valuable, but at the same time, you want to give it at the information at a pace that is manageable. Your job descriptions there, with having the concrete deliverables I was talking about for increasing board member satisfaction, clarity in your mission statements, and we talked about these evaluations. And I hope it's clear that I mentioned evaluations can be self-evaluations or group evaluations. So you can see how the board is acting as a unit, or how certain individuals may not be functioning well. The confusion of roles, we talked about that shared leadership grid, a one-page document of describing each of your committees with time commitments, with main activities to be done, even a budget, and the time that it takes to participate in that committee, how often they meet, is definitely good. An open communication with staff. It's a fine line. Certain staff participate more with board members, others participate less. Make sure to always have the executive director as that bridge between staff and board. I did touch on a mentor. We've seen it many times, it being very, very useful, and it's not a commitment for life, but just for the beginning of the new board member's life. Trying to prevent burnout with this transition plan, these term limits we talked about. If I can check, I think I didn't ask, do folks practice having term limits or not? Can you type in the chat box which folks have term limits? And if you do, maybe share with us how long is your term limits. Yes, we have 2-year term limits, no term limits. Yes, term limits are 2 years, but we check in annually and can re-elect every 2 years. 4-year limits, but usually extended. Yes, 2 terms of 3 years each. Then you have to take a year off, but can come back. Usually people do not, though. Term limits of 4 years for officers, board members elected at local watershed organization level. Okay, excellent. Well, and I did touch briefly on that of how people can stay engaged with your organization even after they term out. You can make them advisors, you can make them consultants. There's definitely a lot of people that use former board members still in their board and not so much as a active board member. There's also groups that do set an upper age limit on their board members, just for energy purposes, I assume. Thank you for sharing that. We did talk about the recognition, the development opportunities, the training opportunities. I personally like that a lot. When board members learn new skills, they definitely seem reinvigorated and appreciative. So not having the right enough or the right board members, it's the recruitment practices, these skills grid that I've talked about, skills and talents that I've mentioned before. So we're almost to the top of the hour, even though we do have 90 minutes set. So I'd like to welcome people to type in a few questions or reflections that they may have had as we wind down. I don't see any questions. Oh, there's some popping up. We struggle to find new board members. Advice. That's a good question, and I frankly have seen that in many groups, saying our pool of people is pretty small. Your board members will probably be your first point of reference in terms of suggesting new acquaintances or their own circle of individuals. Does anybody else have other advice for finding new board members? Definitely bringing them up the ranks of your larger set of volunteers, committee members, so that they're learning the ropes, learning about the organization, and they're moving up in terms of responsibility, sometimes referred to as the pyramid of engagement. So definitely we know that you have more volunteers than board members, right? The board members are the stellar volunteers. But if your staff and you are looking at individuals that are true champions and they come to all of your events, they're regulars, just start asking them, start cultivating whether they're interested in more responsibilities. What is the experience of beginning to recruit outside of your networks, posting online through River Network, or are there different online suggestions for posting? Yeah, recruiting outside your network, you just don't want to be like too broad that the board member has nothing to do with your organization. I would be cautious there in terms of where you're posting for board members. A lot of states have nonprofit associations that they can kind of like pair up. Professionals, new professionals arriving to cities with potential organizations they may want to join. So just I don't know if I understand correctly here, Daniel, in terms of how outside your network. I wouldn't recommend having board members that don't live within your watershed or don't live close to your watershed. How often should strategic plans be updated? What is the optimum duration of a plan? Strategic plans will be the topic of next webinar, so I don't want to give that away, Wendy. It also varies on the organization. Typically, I've seen strategic plans be 3 years. 5 was the old practice, but the duration of them about 3 years. And really, into your second year, you're already starting to plan what the next one will look like. But again, stay tuned. Strategic plans will be the next webinar, actually. We don't have staff, and some board members are overextended and others not as engaged. So yeah, we talked about that exactly, right? There are differences in personality. Some people do volunteer for everything, and other people are more introvert or rather lead from behind. So I would advise talking with those folks one-on-one, especially because you don't have staff, so you are the organizing board where the board does all the work. So talking one-on-one with the less engaged people and ask them, what is the area that you want to use your talents? What skills do you have? What can we do that makes this experience worth your time? Do you ever do trials of potential board members, i.e. get involved for a few months before officially voting them in to ensure they are a good fit? I don't think we call them a trial of a board member, but you have a trial as a member. You have a volunteer and you give them more responsibilities. They can be a coordinator, a team leader, a committee member, a committee co-chair, and eventually, I think when you vote them, yes, they become board members. Maybe other people have tried a trial board member, period. But that's why I mentioned those interviews, those questionnaires, those agreement forms. There's all these documentation, all these processes that you can see or highlight red flags, trouble areas. Again, you try to understand the personality, how that person responds, what is good for them, where they again want to use their talents, and how they interact with the rest of the team. It's very, very important. Can you motivate board members to be more involved and gain more reward for being involved? Yeah, I would recommend maybe like I said, a healthy competitions without it being too onerous. Recognitions when you say this person brought in these funds or this person connected us with this new group that we hadn't touched bases on. I think when you mention them on newsletters, when you mention them on annual meetings, when you give them a mug that says 5 years of service or something like that, all those little things go a long way because everybody likes to feel appreciated, I would say. And I don't know why my screen suddenly disappeared, but I'm glad it was caught on. So that's the questions I have right now. Thank you. Thank you very much for these questions there. I hope they were useful. Okay, so in conclusion, good governance in a strong board, it's one that holds itself accountable, right? It is consensus oriented, diverse. It always strives for efficiency. It follows the rules of law. Is inclusive, responsive, transparent. We, in our effort to ensure we have the right leaders and the right mechanisms, we should have the structures, the practices to help them thrive. That culture that I referred to, those policies. Something that goes beyond policies, those interpersonal relationships. They're going to be reinforced by your lines of communications. This committee structure, I see it as a very, very good way to delegate and to, again, evaluate the response of individuals. It also allows for increased productivity and satisfaction. So I don't think anybody's short of activities or engagement opportunities that they can provide to their board members. There was a reminder here, and this is a good point. River Network does provide a job posting. So if you are looking for board members, volunteers, or to fill some job positions, our premium members are able to do that through our webpage. So thank you for reminding me. So again, before you go, when this webinar shuts off, there will be a pop-up with a survey, and it will literally take you less than 5 minutes to fill out. You should also remember that next month we will have this goal, strategies, and tactics session. And for those that don't know, please save the date too on our River Rally Conference. It's our national conference in 2019. It will be in Cleveland, Ohio. We expect close to 500 river watershed champions representing nonprofits, academia, government, foundations, industry, concerned community members. It's 3 days of education, inspiration, celebration. As a due-paying member, you receive 25% off rally registration. And right now, we have extended the call for presentation proposals for a few more days. So make sure if you want to present to submit that through our webpage. I'm going to stay on the line for a few more minutes, but that concludes our webinar for today. I appreciate your time, and again, apologize for a few of the technical glitches, but thank you very much. Okay, I don't see any more questions. So again, thank you all, and be on the lookout for an email with all the handouts, and feel free to reach out to myself. My other team member is Caroline Bott, and Diana Toledo is our supervisor. So our leadership team definitely interested in helping you. Have a good day.